stepsister stole my fiancé and sent me postcards rubbing it in. Now they're broke and begging me for a job at the family business she was supposed to inherit. I, 28F, was engaged to my boyfriend from college about 4 years ago. We had been together throughout college and got engaged at the age of 23. We were engaged for a year, but a week before our wedding, he took off with my stepsister. My ex-fiancé, Greg, 28M, and my stepsister, Melissa, 28F, eloped a week before we were supposed to get married and left nothing but a letter for me. In the letter, Greg mentioned that he had started an affair with Melissa a couple of months after we got engaged and realized that he couldn't marry me because that would be unfair to both of us and also to Melissa, since they were the ones actually in love. He said that he believed the universe had just used me to lead him to his true love, so he couldn't be with me anymore and cheat us all out of a happy future by marrying me. And that was it. They ran away, and I didn't see them again until recently. Greg's parents covered the entire cost of the wedding, so I didn't have to pay anything because they were so embarrassed by what their son had pulled. But that was pretty much the last interaction I had with his family since we had nothing more to talk about. My family, however, was more than embarrassed. My parents were livid, and my father had even started considering hiring a private detective to track down where the two of them were and drag them back home for answers. Just to let you know, my father is actually my stepdad, but he's been my father ever since I was really little, and I've always addressed him as such because, to me, he's my only father. I have never known my biological dad. My dad had left our family shortly after I was born, and my mother never saw him again, as he had signed away his rights over me. They had never been married. She then married my father when I was 8 years old. Melissa and I used to go to the same school, and that's how our parents met each other. But for some reason, Melissa decided she didn't like me and went on to treat me badly for the next couple of years. She was a bully in the truest sense of the word, and she and her friends would constantly pick on me at school. It didn't even stop when we got home, and she would keep looking for opportunities to make me feel bad. I did complain to my parents several times, and they tried to reprimand her, but it wasn't enough. She wasn't even scared of our parents, so she continued to bully me. My years in school were a total nightmare because of her and all her cronies. Just like my dad wasn't in the picture, Melissa's mom wasn't around either. That was because her mother had passed away a few years after she was born. Her mother died in the middle of the night from an epileptic episode, so anytime my mother tried to discipline her, Melissa would tell her she had no right to scold her because she wasn't her real mom. My father tried to get her to stop bullying me, but it didn't work because Melissa wasn't scared of anything. They tried everything, from scolding her to talking nicely, but nothing stopped her from picking on me. Occasionally, they would even threaten to send her away, and she would dare them to do it because she knew they were empty threats. That was just her in middle school, and with time, she only got worse. By the time we were in high school, she had already picked up a bunch of bad habits and was pretty much a juvenile delinquent. She started smoking and would occasionally sneak out of the house to go drinking with her friends, who were just as bad as her. It wasn't until she got arrested one night with her friends for breaking into somebody's house while drunk that our parents finally decided to send her away to get her the help she obviously needed. After a few weeks of begging and protesting, my parents finally got her to go to a rehabilitation center for troubled teens. She wasn't happy about it, but my father had been very firm, saying that if she wanted to live with us and be a part of this family, she had to get better. He couldn't allow this behavior to continue and let her trouble everybody else, as she was becoming a menace to society. She left in our sophomore year and didn't come back until we had already graduated, since she had enrolled in a school near the rehab center and was living with her aunt. I didn't see her for those couple of years, mostly because I wasn't interested in how my biggest bully was doing. My parents would visit her every weekend and ask if I wanted to come along, but my answer was always no. Her friends started ignoring me and pretended like I didn't exist after she left, which improved my high school experience considerably since now I didn't have anyone bullying me constantly. Melissa continued with her education in rehab, and when she came back, the first thing she did was apologize for whatever she had put me through. She seemed a lot calmer, and I thought she had changed for the better, so I forgave her. We were about to go off to college in a few months anyway, so it didn't matter. Once we started college, I moved out, and so did she. We would only come back for the holidays, and she was much nicer to me after that. By nicer, I don't mean that she actually behaved nicely with me, I mean she would just ignore me instead of picking on me every chance she got, like she used to in the past. If I'm being honest, it was a much welcome change because I would rather be ignored than be bullied. Our parents noticed this but didn't try to force us to get along or act like sisters because, given our history, this was more than good. Then, I started dating Greg, and after being together for a year, I decided to bring him home for Thanksgiving to introduce him to my parents. All of us got along really well, and for the first time, I noticed that even Melissa was taking an interest in the conversation, which was rare since she came back from rehab. She and Greg were actually getting along, and after I started dating him, she expressed more interest in being friends with me and would often reach out just to talk, which she never did before. I didn't understand what was going on, and I had a tiny suspicion that maybe she had a thing for Greg, so one day I decided to just ask her if the real reason she was trying to be friends with me was because of him. I was paranoid, but she laughed at that and told me it wasn't the case. Greg had mentioned what a great relationship he had with his siblings at our first dinner together while talking about his family, and that's what made her rethink the way she had been behaving with me ever since she came back. She said that's why she was now trying to make amends and improve our relationship. It had nothing to do with Greg directly, but he had definitely played a role by being the catalyst and forcing her to think about our relationship. She told me that she had held me responsible for her being sent away for the longest time, but eventually, she had come to terms with the fact that it wasn't my fault and that she had brought it on herself with her terrible behavior. So, it was about time she stopped punishing me for it and started really trying to become part of this family. That wouldn't be possible until she apologized from the bottom of her heart and actively worked on our relationship. I'm an emotional fool, and what she said to me that day touched me. So, like an idiot, I decided to forgive her and be friends with her. And I guess that's what hurt the most, because she betrayed me after we became friends. We were on good terms for a long time, and she was actively involved in the wedding prep. I wouldn't say we were the best of friends, but we were not as bad as we used to be. While we were rebuilding our relationship, we would meet at least once or twice a month and talk. So, by the time I got engaged, we were doing well, and I had introduced her to Greg in person as well. Before the engagement, whenever we met at family events, they behaved pretty normally, so I never suspected anything because I had no reason to. Even after the engagement, they continued to behave as if nothing was going on, and not for a second did I think Greg might have a thing for Melissa. It simply didn't occur to me because Greg put up a really convincing act of being in love with me while cheating on me with her. Even Melissa was convincing, pretending to be my friend. So, I didn't find out the truth until it was too late, and they were already gone. My parents wanted to trace them and bring them back home, but I convinced them to leave it alone because I just wanted to forget everything. It was bad enough that the two of them had made a complete fool out of me and ran away a week before I was supposed to get married. I absolutely didn't want more drama because I was really depressed and just didn't have it in me. I spent the next couple of weeks doing nothing but working and sleeping because I wanted to avoid confronting my feelings. My heart was obviously broken, and I was numb. But the worst was yet to come. A couple of weeks after my supposed wedding day, I received a postcard from Melissa. She was in California, but that wasn't all. She had also used a bunch of photos of her and Greg, and they appeared to be really happy. It was very obvious she was rubbing it in my face because she even mentioned that she was sorry about the surprise before my wedding, but she wasn't sorry, obviously. It was just meant to anger me. That's when I realized she had never really forgiven me for what happened all those years ago and still held me responsible for being sent away. She had never even wanted to be my friend at any point, she had just used me to get to Greg, and I had trusted her. I let her use me as a stepping stone. It was a really diabolical plan, I'll give her that. For days after she sent me that postcard, I couldn't sleep because I was losing my mind over it. It was a really traumatic experience, and I had to get therapy for months to undo all the damage and deal with my trust issues. The postcard wasn't even a one-off incident, she sent me postcards of her and Greg for months after that. It only ended after about a year because I hadn't responded to her or played into the drama. Our parents were really upset about it and naturally cut all ties with her after that. They didn't even try to reach out to her after the first postcard. That was a huge loss for Melissa because she was all set to inherit her dad's business. She was a business major, and that was part of the reason she had chosen that route for herself, because she wanted to join her father. But of course, after what she pulled, our father cut all ties with her and told me I could join him instead because he felt like he had to make up for everything in a major way. But I didn't have a business degree, and I was actually a history major, which pretty much had nothing to do with business. So, I needed to learn the ropes first. My father said that wasn't a problem because he was willing to teach me everything he knew so that I could eventually take over the business instead of Melissa. So, I agreed and started working under him to learn how to run the business. He could retire and hand over the reins to me after a while. I worked really hard for a couple of years, and last year, I was finally promoted, and my father retired. It was an amazing feeling because I had started from scratch and had to learn everything, but now everything was smooth sailing under me and has been for some time. Thanks to me, my parents can now spend more time together without worrying about the business because I'm taking care of it. It's been this way for quite a while, and I pretty much stopped thinking about Greg after I started working for my father because that took up all my time. That, along with therapy, helped me move on, and I would say that now I've completely moved on and don't think about them or what they did. I never thought they would ever reach out to me again, let alone ask for my help. It would take a lot of guts and an utter lack of functioning brain cells to ask me for help after they screwed me over, made a fool of me, and then went on to rub it in my face. But I guess Melissa and Greg really do lack brain cells because that's exactly what happened. A few days back, I was at home because it was the weekend, and around lunchtime, I heard someone frantically ringing my doorbell. I thought it was the pizza I had ordered, so I didn't think much of it. When I opened the door, I received the biggest surprise of my life. Instead of a delivery guy, I found Melissa standing outside my house, looking really worried. I didn't know what to say, so I just silently waited for her to speak. While looking at her, I realized she was definitely here to ask for help because she looked destitute, and her appearance gave it away. Even as a kid, Melissa always dressed well, but when I saw her, she was dressed in old, faded clothes that had obviously been purchased a long time ago. Her jeans were way too short, and she herself looked like she hadn't been eating. I had already made up my mind that whatever she was about to ask me, the answer was going to be no. So when she said she needed my help because she and Greg had been struggling for a long time, I didn't feel sorry. Ever since Greg had lost his job a couple of months ago, he started drinking instead of looking for a new job. Even though she had been trying to find a job for herself, she couldn't because she had quit everything to stay at home and do all the household work when she first moved away with Greg. Because of that, she hadn't been working recently, and the gap in her resume made her a weaker contender for all the jobs she had applied to. She said she had heard from a couple of relatives that our father had retired and handed over the reins of the business to me, so now she was here to ask if I would be willing to hire Greg and give him something to do. Melissa told me she had come all the way just to ask for my help and said she was sorry for whatever she did in the past. But now she was counting on me to bail her out. She told me she hadn't even approached our parents yet and had come straight to my house to ask for help because she knew I had a kind heart. She felt awfully guilty about betraying me in the past but was sure I wouldn't turn her away now that she needed my help. Her entitlement was so ridiculous that I ended up laughing in her face. I told her to apply somewhere else because I don't hire cheaters. Then, I shut the door in her face and walked back into the living room, preparing to call the cops if she didn't get off my property soon. Thankfully, she did leave that day, but she hasn't left me alone since. After her visit, the first thing I did was call our parents and tell them about it. They told me they had heard from a couple of neighbors that Melissa was back in town without Greg, but they hadn't brought it up. We live in a relatively small town, so everybody knows everybody. We were quickly able to find out that Melissa had been here for about a week before she finally paid me a visit. She had been living with one of her old cronies from high school. It was probably that friend who told her where I was living and also about the fact that I had inherited the business that was supposed to be hers, and now she was really milking that. A couple of days after she visited me, she decided to go meet our parents and tell them how heartless I was being. She expected them to be on her side now that she had the upper hand in who was suffering more. But she couldn't have been more mistaken. My father told her that the business was now mine to run, and I could make whatever decision I deemed fit. He didn't have any say in it anymore, and he wasn't going to micromanage me. My mother reminded Melissa that she was the one who had screwed me over by running away with my fiancé after pretending to be my friend for years. She said Melissa completely deserved whatever was happening to her. She had lost the right to ask any of us for help, especially me, after she had been sending me postcards to torment me. Melissa tried to defend herself by saying that it was all in the past and she was a different person now, but my parents told her she had to leave because they wanted nothing to do with her anymore. That led to her throwing a tantrum at their house and claiming that they had always favored me over her and treated me like the golden child. She told my father that, despite being his own flesh and blood, he had never treated her like that and acted as if I was his only daughter, while she was worth nothing to him. When he told her he had made more allowances for her behavior in the past than any other parent would, she said it still didn't matter. She said I had everything she was supposed to have, including the business, and accused me of showing off about it. She claimed it wasn't even her fault that Greg had fallen for her and wanted to spend his life with her instead of me, but for some reason, she was the one being punished for it. She also claimed the postcards she had sent were meant to be a genuine apology and she wasn't trying to torment me. Honestly, I haven't been able to stop thinking about that since my father told me what she said. In a way, it's true that she was supposed to inherit this business and be in my place, but she lost it because of her own actions. I had no part to play in that. I never told my father to cut her out of his life and hand over the business to me, he did that of his own volition. It feels kind of unfair for her to blame me for this. Also, the thing she said about me being the golden child is absolutely not true, but I can see why she would feel that way. In her head, she was sent away because I complained about her incessant bullying. A parent deciding to send their kid away is a really big deal, and I know it was rough on my father, but again, it's not his fault or mine. If he hadn't taken the necessary steps to prevent it, Melissa might have turned out to be a criminal or something, because that's the way she was headed. Apart from that, I don't really think she was trying to apologize with the postcards and was probably just trying to cover it up by saying they were a genuine apology. I just feel bad for her because her husband turned out to be completely useless, and now she has to bail him out. She actually came to me, and I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for her, so I kind of regret treating her the way I did. I have everything now, and she has nothing, so I can't help but feel sorry for her. That's just who I am as a person. Besides, it's been a long time, and I don't feel like holding on to that grudge anymore. But I also don't want to help her out in any way. The most I can do is give them my sympathy, but I really don't want to hire them or help them out with money. I think it's enough that I even feel bad for her after everything she put me through. Most people probably wouldn't. The only reason I even feel bad for her right now is because this business was actually supposed to be hers, and now that I'm in a position of power, I'm finally getting back at her. I feel like it's not right. It might be because of what she said about me being the golden child, or maybe just plain old imposter syndrome, but I feel weird about this. Update 1. I didn't have any idea what to do, and the comments here just confused me even more because some of you said I was doing the right thing by turning them away, while the other half said I had always been the golden child, and that's why Melissa started to act out. So, this wasn't as helpful as I thought it would be. I decided to talk to my parents, because every time I've had to face problems in my life, I've always approached them for advice. I did the same this time as well. They told me I had no reason to feel sorry for Melissa because everybody had gone above and beyond to try to make her a better person. But if she wasn't willing to turn over a new leaf at any point in her life, then there wasn't much more we could do for her. My father told me he had every intention of letting her take over the business had she behaved herself and been a good daughter. But she failed at everything and made a total mockery out of our family after that. She would be a fool to expect him to let her take over or even be part of the family anymore. That made me feel considerably better, because talking to my parents always does. So, I'll try not to let myself feel guilty about things that I don't do anymore. Update 2. About a week has passed since Melissa showed up at my door, and since her visit to my parents, we haven't heard from her. I almost thought she had gone back to Greg until today, when she showed up at my workplace to make a scene. It was horrible because she just waltzed into the place. She had known the ins and outs ever since she was a child, so she got in without alerting security quite easily. Then, she went on to stand in front of my office and started shouting about how I had stolen this business from right under her nose by pretending to be a good little girl for our parents and constantly being a bootlicker so they would approve of me. She claimed I was responsible for vilifying her by falsely accusing her of bullying me throughout our childhood and even talking my father into sending her to rehab, just so I could cement my position as the golden child of the family. She went on to announce that this business was supposed to be hers, but now I was refusing to let her be part of it because I was jealous that Greg had chosen her over me. Unlike our parents, who had always favored me, I wasn't used to being overlooked, so I lost my mind and turned them against her. When I heard the yelling, I decided to go out and check it out myself after calling security. I tried to tell her to shut up, but she went on for a good few minutes until she was finally thrown out of the building. I decided to call my dad before calling the cops to get his opinion, and he was furious. He told me to go ahead and call the police. Thankfully, when the cops showed up, she was still lurking nearby, probably waiting for me to leave the building so she could yell at me or maybe do something worse, like physically attack me. The cops took her away and charged her with trespassing and disturbing the peace. They're minor charges, and she'll probably get off with either just a fine or maybe community service in the worst case scenario. But it's certainly going on her record, and that's never good. I told my dad that she had been charged and arrested. I expected him to be a little upset about it, but he only seemed exasperated. He told me he was just tired of dealing with her insanity. I honestly feel bad for him because it can't be easy having a daughter like Melissa and being blamed for everything that goes wrong in her life, even though most of the time it's her own fault. Honestly, we have all been really patient. Update 3. Okay, so I think Melissa has returned to California because it's been a couple of days and we haven't heard from her, which is weird because we expected her to lash out at us after her arrest. But my dad asked around and was told that a couple of people saw her heading towards the airport the other day, so I'm assuming that she has left. It's honestly a huge relief that she is gone now because I was genuinely afraid that she was going to try to do something explosive to get our attention next, and that's always bad news. I don't know what she is going to do about the whole situation with Greg now because it seems unlikely that she is going to get help from anyone else after this. I just hope that she finds something to do and gets out of this mess. No, I'm not even being kind or compassionate right now. I have very selfish reasons to say this, and it's because I know that if she doesn't find a way out of this mess, then she will just come back here with Greg and bother us some more. I don't want that, so I genuinely hope and pray that either she or Greg finds a job and is able to support themselves. Either way, I don't have to hear from her for a couple of weeks at least, or I believe that this nightmare is over now.